Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Linda Francis, Director of Success of All Youth, or SAY. Thank you for coming out this evening. We appreciate you braving the cold and making the decision to come here as opposed to anything else you could have been doing this evening, so thank you so much. SAY's mission is to help our community work together to empower every young person to reach their full potential. We've gathered information and data on 10 indicators of child and youth well-being, and we are facilitating a number of community partners in working together to improve outcomes in these areas while utilizing an equity lens. That means that we don't just consider the needs and outcomes of the majority. We consider how our community systems affect all of our kids and work to create systems that support all of our kids. Research has shown that having confidence in the ability to exert control over one's own motivation, behavior, and social environment is essential for dealing with the difficulties and setbacks that come with life in general, let alone those that come with inequities and trauma. Having grit alludes to just surviving, but having self-efficacy, that means you're thriving. Albert Bandura says, a strong sense of efficacy enhances human accomplishment and personal well-being in many ways. People with high assurance in their capabilities approach difficult tasks as challenges to be mastered, rather than as threats to be avoided. Such an efficacious outlook fosters intrinsic interest and deep engrossment in activities. They set themselves challenging goals and maintain strong commitment to them. The young people speaking tonight all have a strong sense of self-efficacy. They don't speak for all students of color or for all experiences, but they can help give us some insight into what we, as a community, can do better to address the conditions that have demanded such a strong sense of self-efficacy. Tonight, we are focusing on the efforts of these young people to address equity and what they have learned in the process. It is our hope that you leave tonight with more information about barriers and successes they face, what they are currently doing, and what you can do to support equity in the community. We hope to leave tonight with a greater sense of what SAY and the Wednesday Journal can do to improve our role in communicating change. Tonight is not intended to cover all aspects of equity, or even racial equity. We can't do that justice in 90 minutes. The question remains, what are we willing to do to create lasting change? Well, these young folks have at least started the work. We have Michaela Anderson. She's a senior at OPRF and founding member of SAFE. We have Charlie Lemke-Bell. He's a senior and student council president. Both are also on the committee that is writing D200's equity policy. We have Jocelyn Mraz. She's a a sophomore at OPRF and a member of SAFE. We have Daysha Walker, and she is a junior at OPRF and a member of the South Asian Youth Club. And we have Alexia Lopez, who is a junior and a member of Aspira. So let's begin. What do you all feel are some of the most pressing challenges regarding racial equity in Oak Park and River Forest?
Well, I'm a strong believer in the idea that a lot of the racial equity problems that we have in our community really are tied to the socioeconomic divide that exists within our community. We have a lot of our minority residents in both Oak Park and River Forest living on the economic and geographic fringe of our town. We're an expensive town. We're a town that prices people out. And there's absolutely a correlation between how much someone's paying in taxes and how little money people have in their bank accounts at the end of their day, and their ability to have the resources and to fund the opportunities for their child to succeed. So a lot of the educational schism we see with stuff like the achievement gap is really the product of the socioeconomic divide that exists within our community. It's a product of systematic racism that has, oppressed, minority groups in this country for generations. And we see at OPRF the result of that divide, of that disparity. I think that when we look at Oak Park and the racial divisions that exist within it, it's because we have a community that's based upon the haves and the have-nots. We're a community where, some people feel like they belong and some people feel like they don't belong. And all that affects people's ability to be engaged with the community, to find opportunities within the community, to, go to parent-teacher nights, to, ensure that their child, has the best opportunities. There's so many divisions within our community that I think stem from economics. And, it's a much bigger issue, and it's one that goes beyond just the borders of Oak Park and River Forest. But I think that if we want to talk about equity, we have to talk about racism, specifically, in my mind, systematic racism.
All right. Well, what role do you think general student body organizations like student government or Future Philanthropist Program, anything like that, what role do you believe that they can play in helping promote racial equity?
Well, I don't really know a lot about those groups. I actually haven't heard much about them, and I think that might be one of the problems, is that the information, not just from student body groups like that, but just from the administration and schools and things in general, is pretty lacking. Like, it's hard to find, and many students aren't aware of it, and parents and people in the community aren't aware of it either. So I feel like if information about those groups and how to get involved and how to help and things like that, if that was more available, then more change would happen, probably more quickly as well. So.
Well, there's absolutely a divide, I think, and just kind of piggybacking off that point, there's a divide at our school in terms of, who is involved with a lot of extracurriculars and who is not. And I absolutely think it's an awareness issue. I absolutely think it's an engagement issue from the administration. I think more efforts can be done to ensure that every student is involved with an extracurricular activity, that every student is a part of a club where they feel like they can belong and they can have community. A lot of clubs that represent affinity groups at our school, are not promoted, are not known, are not, made aware of to members of those affinity groups. So I think that if we can, really put a bigger emphasis, put more resources, and put more attention towards clubs that do great work at our school, whether that's something like Aspira or, Black or Blue, there's a lot of great clubs at our school that represent different groups. APA, we need to put more attention, more resources towards those. And, student government in terms of what we do to ensure that, there's issues like racial equity being dealt with is, we facilitate conversations, we talk with the administration. You spoke about the fact that both Michaela and I are on a committee, I work, on several committees now to ensure that students are represented, that students and issues that they matter, that they care about, are talked about and are at the table. And I think that goes to another point as well, is that, if we want to have more action on a lot of issues at our school, we need to ensure that students have a bigger share of the slice at the table. We need to have more students in the conversation with the administration. We need to have more students on committees and in meetings with the administration talking about important issues. And I don't think we have enough of that yet. There's been some great progress this year. There's been some great inclusion this year. But I think that ensuring that we invite every group to all the meetings and to all the committees that we have is really important.
Conversations in our community about race equity are usually focused on Black and white. What is missing from the discussion regarding other students of color?
I think what's missing from the conversation is really whether we're listening to other people's experiences. I've had friends that are Latinos and they're really frustrated because they see the conversation at OPRF as Black and white. And I tell them that it's because we haven't exposed them to what Latinos have gone through. So we go through different challenges of language and culture, and mostly of generalization. Like in America right now, we live in a time where Latinos are constantly targeted, but at school, it's not seen as that. It's seen as Latinos just face challenges for being Latinos. But, you know, Latinos in Latin America is a pretty large group. You have many different countries, and they each face different challenges. So I think what's missing from the conversation is somewhat listening, but also somewhat thinking thinking about why is it Black and white.
I can speak for the South Asians in the school, not all of them, but most. For most of them, I only knew about like 3 or 4 South Asians at our school until our club was created, and now I know like 18 of them. And I had no idea, and these are only the female South Asians, I haven't even met like any of the guys yet. And I had no idea that there were this many South Asians at our school. So I think it's a matter of like community. Like if you have a community, then you can use that community to like express and tell people about your experiences, and hopefully they'll listen and understand. I also feel like from the South Asian community, some people are fine with not being noticed and fine just living like in a shadow, I suppose, or something like that, or we're fine not being the main topic of Black and white and kind of just like moving along with the flow. And I think that's a problem that the South Asian community has had for a really long time, of not being involved in fights that we should be involved in because we're fine with the status quo. So I think that's something that needs to change as well.
I definitely agree, because like I have a friend that's Asian, and like one time I remember I led a protest in the school, and like it was like I didn't think about to include Asians, like, and that was like my fault on my part, but like it was just, I was mainly talking about like Black people and Latinos, and then like, he brought up like how come Asians are not included as well, because we are also people of color. And I was like I took that into account. I was like, yeah, you're right. And I think it's because like in what we learned in class and like our history books and stuff, like we don't learn about like Asian history or Latino history. Like we're learning about like all the like white people, how they came in or whatever, how they went into like the lands and stuff, and then they had slaves and stuff. I think we need to like get more information from different cultures as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because not just like in history classes, but in English with literature and other things too. It kind of depends on your teacher whether they talk about the other communities in history, because it's always just been like Black and white in history. Like obviously the huge thing about Native Americans that's never talked about. It's not only Native Americans, but they never talk about the Asian immigrants that came about when all the other white immigrants came too, and things like that. So I think conversation in schools and the education has to be fixed, because then that will increase awareness as well.
So as someone who is a part of the Black and white conversations that we have at OPRF, first off, I would never let like a white person tell me how to protest about being Black and how I feel. So I would never, as a Black person, tell someone outside of my race how to protest and how to solve their own issues because I don't know, because I'm not living it. But a lot of the stuff, a lot of the conversations that we have, a lot of the material that we cover, we fought for because nobody else was going to do it. It's just right now, it's just those conversations between black and white people, I feel like are starting to become like romanticized because we're gonna like break barriers and we're gonna fix the problems by talking about it, but we're really like, we're not arguing, but we're standing up for ourselves. So like in middle school, for instance, I went to Brooks, we had to make a, so we were going through a book and it said that that slaves migrated to America. So my mom and another student of color, her mom, they put together some type of protest and people signed a petition to get it removed and get that book removed from the class. So stuff like that, little stuff like that, we have to fight for, and it's like, now is our time that we're learning. We've learned from our ancestors how to fight that battle, so now it's just becoming just a bit more almost generic, like we're going to talk about race, and when we talk about race it's going to be black and white, but before it was just nobody talks about anything but just a white savior complex, that's it. And so I'm saying that I would like to hear more experiences from other people of color, but it's kind of like I can't speak up for them, and I'm not really seeing them, and I don't know how to help them. So if I knew how, I would, because I'm tired of hearing about my history as well, because I know it, and I know other people know it at this point, hopefully, and I know that I'm tired of it being told by white men at the school. So if there was something to contribute, I wouldn't know how to say, oh, I want this part of Asian history to be added, because I really don't know. Because, it's not my culture. I don't know what's important to any other person of color. I know what's important to me as a person of color. So how could I help advocate for you in class?
And, kind of going off of, learning about other people's history, I remember my sophomore year, I wanted to sign up for Latin American history. And I was told by my counselor that it doesn't exist anymore, that, it's a class that, they put on, the curriculum that they made, but that it just doesn't happen, if not enough students sign up for it, that it's a class that, is not really a class unless people are, going to do it. And I think that, there's a good saying, if you're not paying attention, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And, I think that kind of ties in here where, we talk about, learning about each other's history. We talk about, being a diverse community where we understand what other people go through and, we try to, learn from the past and learn from history. How can we do that if we don't understand, nearly a quarter of our population's history? Like Oak Park has a growing Latino population, OPRF has a growing Latino population, and our world history class doesn't do justice in teaching us about their history. The Asian population at our school, it might not be the biggest compared to other suburban schools, but that shouldn't mean we don't prioritize their history, that we don't want to learn about their history. If we can talk about the idea of having a holistic education, we really can't talk about that until we have a curriculum that reflects every student at OPRF's history, and that's not where we are right now. We're at a point where it is very black and white. And, we absolutely need to value and cherish the fact that we do have African American, history classes and African history. That's something a lot of other schools wouldn't have. But we also need to encourage and support other cultures being represented, not just in the curriculum books of our classes, but with actual classes that you can sign up for so that you can focus on other people's history, not just your own.
I'm really glad you brought the Latin American history topic, because this is something Espera has been talking about for a while, and it's something we have been fighting for. And we've asked our principal, why doesn't it run? And he basically said that there had to be enough students to run a class. And so what I'm asking is, could they make an exception for Asian history class or Latino history class and just have less students but actually try to advertise it, to not tell what your counselor said to you, like, oh, it's not going to run. Because I grew up here and I've always wanted to know more about my history, but I've just never been taught. And so I'm wondering, for like a white person, how much have they been exposed to it?
Yeah, I can agree with that a lot. But going back to what you were saying about like where the Asian community is, it kind of goes back to like the Asian community has been absent in a lot of this. Like, I'm pretty sure the South Asian Club is like the first Asian club like ever at OPRF. And Aspira and Blue, they've been around a lot longer because you all have like not only know how to organize, but you like get a community, you see each other and you like get together and stuff like that. A lot of people in the Asian community kiss up to white people like all the time, and it's such an issue and it irritates me so much because they know exactly what's going on and then they're not ignorant about it, they just ignore it, and it's really irritating, which is why the South Asian Club is so important to me, because everyone in that club is a teenager like us. And they all care about these issues and they want to change. And I would be more than happy to work with SAVE and other groups to get change in the school, because we've been like waiting for this, you know? And now there's talk of the Pan-Asian Club that's getting started too, the Pan-Asian Leadership Community, which is really, really nice because it's like all Asians and everything. So this is a big deal for me, especially because I'm half Black and half Indian. So not having like a community for Asian people has always felt like absent for me. So I think it's like a slow change, but we're getting there.
From going off what you said about how like most Asians like make hands up to white people, I think that's very true, especially because my friend, like, he always talk about it. He's actually like, he tells me like he teaches himself his own history about Asians. And he told me like that Mexicans, like, they have Asian in them, and they're like, I thought that was very interesting because I did not know that. And I think like if like Asians were to be taught that, like, I think that they would have more of a connection to more people of color, because I mean, I don't know if any other people know, but like maybe they didn't know if that like we were all mixed and stuff.
So perhaps a concept around shared history, you know, that histories aren't necessarily siloed. You know, there's a shared history, but if we treat it like a shared history, then we're talking about everyone who's played a part in it. So, you know, as another option of the way we can look at how we help educate our young people. But that kind of leads into, there was a question that was asked at the last conversation, and it was a bit complex and it was difficult to read and we couldn't really answer it at the time. So I've kind of woven it into a question for us to discuss this evening. And so it was about, there is something called ACEs, and ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. And it speaks to experiences that are toxic and unsupported stressors that pose lifelong physical, mental, and emotional harm on children. So there's something called an ACEs survey that you would go through and look to see if a child has had particular kinds of traumatic experiences that you need to watch out for. And so it's had 10 categories, but recently researchers have added racism to the original 10 categories. They've added some racism, bullying, some additional things that they feel are also indicative of potential trauma. So in light of that, how are racism and equity present in school? And do you believe that the treatment of racism in school, that is, the discussions that are had and the way that it is covered from a curriculum perspective, do you believe that that adds additional trauma to the experience?
Well, I feel like the curriculum about race in OPRF doesn't exist actually, which is why we're working on a racial equity curriculum so that we can actually instill those values so people can have those conversations. I notice that when I'm talking about race or anything that I feel pertains to race, I'm very comfortable, very fluid. I don't have to speak eloquently about anything, but like white kids, they just sit up and it's like they shut off, they get defensive and they're not listening. And then the teachers don't help at all either. Considering most of them are white trying to hold these conversations, I don't think that, I mean, they have racial consciousness training, but I'm not sure how that goes for them. Clearly it's not working out, but it's just watching them try to hold those conversations and try to, you know, not calm me down, but, you know, like chill down my militant behavior that they think I have. It's just like, it's annoying, and it's also not their fault because that's how the school is letting them do that. The school is not, like after the assembly we had second period of the assembly about hate speech, we had second period to talk about it. Those teachers did not know what they were doing at all. It's just a bunch of kids sitting up there in class angry. They don't know what to say, and white kids are just like shaking like, I don't know what to do. So if we gave them a space or like a procedure to follow, to actually have those conversations so that they are effective and that something actually comes from them, and we don't have to keep having assemblies and we don't have to keep having protests in order for people to talk about race and feel comfortable talking about race and expressing themselves, expressing that they're angry or depressed or feel alone in a race situation, then that's fine. Like we should be able to do that without having to go through several board meetings and always being told no. So we don't really have like a racial, we have racism in part, but we don't have any way to maintain like a procedure of like what happens after a person of color experiences racism, or we don't have a space for white people to say anything ignorant and not feel attacked by black people or people of color in general. We don't have that. So those spaces don't exist in OPRF. And if they do, they're created by the students, and that's why they don't usually go so well, because we're not trained to do it as well as the teachers.
I agree. I think there needs to be more of a connection and more sensitivity when it comes to when a student feels left out or when they feel like their needs are not met because they are part of a certain group. So I have a friend, he recently moved from Chile, and he wanted to move his lunch because he wanted to sit with people that spoke Spanish, just like that's his first language. And his counselor told him that she wouldn't change it because they weren't just doing lunch changes. And I agree, like you can tell that to somebody that has been in Oak Park for 10 years and knows most of their classmates. But when it comes to somebody that has just transferred to school, doesn't know a lot of people, and they want to feel comfortable during their lunchtime, it's the time they get to relax, I feel like they should be more sensitive. And so I think certain small things like that, and also, just like you were saying, what happens to students after they go to when they experience racism. And I have a friend who did experience racism. She was in gym class, and they were talking about Cinco de Mayo and how white people, they make, I'm not generalizing, but certain white people, they make a big deal about Cinco de Mayo when for us Mexicans it doesn't mean the same way. And so she felt very offended. And then other times they call her Maria and her name is not Maria. And it's just certain things like that she doesn't know what to do with those emotions, and oftentimes she just cries. And so I often am put in a position where I don't know whether to be angry that this happened to her or to be sad with her. And so I would just want somebody to tell me, like, how can I help her more, I guess.
I think it's hard
because after a traumatizing event, like everything that happened with the hate speech happens, minority students are not given a space to come together as minority students exclusively, to each of our respective groups, to heal, to talk to each other, to empathize with people who understand what we would be going through. A year before I got to OPRF, Mr. Rouse tried to have an assembly where African Americans could come together and, talk with each other and not feel that we have to parse our words or talk in another way, not to offend anybody else or not to make anyone feel too threatened by us. And that was shut down and condemned by the community at a large, basis, frankly, in my opinion. And I think that if the community wants to do something to support minority students after traumatizing events, one of the best issues is space and the opportunity to heal together, to talk together. Universities and colleges across this country all have, Latinx spaces for just Latinx students to talk with each other. They have spaces exclusive to African Americans. They have spaces exclusive to Asians, to Native Americans, to LGBT people. And, those sort of spaces, because of the fact that we're a public high school, I think people believe don't need to exist or can't exist. And I think that's wrong. And I think that, in the future, if something, well, it's not, really an if, it's a when, in my opinion. When something tragic and hateful happens at our school again, the school and the community need to allow and facilitate a space for minority students and teachers to come together. Because it's traumatizing, frankly, as a minority student to have to sit in a class and know that when you're the only minority student in the class, or you're the only black man in the class, as I am in 3 of my classes, that no one will really understand what you're going through, and that no one will really empathize with how you feel. And that's that's a lonely feeling, that's a sad feeling, and that's something no affinity group at OPRF should have to go through. So I think if we want to talk about trauma and kids going through traumatic experiences, we need to give kids the space that they deserve afterwards.
I also think it's an issue that starts with elementary school when they start doing like the advanced track that is mostly white students. I've always been part of that advanced track because my parents have always pushed me to get into that higher education system because they know as a person of color, if you're not in that, you're going to be behind. And now in the high school, I find that I'm like either one of the only or one of the few people of color in these high-level classes. And I feel like the dynamic between white people and people of color in the school is pretty heavily impacted by just like how you don't have that many classes with those people. Like if you go to the lower level classes, you'll find way more people of color than you will in the higher level classes, which is why there might be more community between them. And another reason why white people are very often not aware of the racism and stuff that happens, because I talk about this stuff with my friends all the time, whether they're white or not. But if white people are only friends with white people, or they're only friends with people of color that don't really care about the issues, and like how are they going to know about it? Because I can guarantee that they're not going to pay attention at assemblies about it, because no one really cares about those things. So I think it's something that starts from a really young age when you separate the kids and stuff like that. So I think it also relates to just how the education system is set up. Because when you go on the playground, you play with people that are in your class. And I always played with the people that I had that advanced class with because those are the people that I knew better and stuff like that.
And you were talking about curriculum. And for sure, I think the school can do something about getting more students of color inside AP classes. Like this year, I'm going to be honest with you, I dropped 2 AP classes because it was just too much for me. And so in those classes, there were only about 3 more students of color, and so what's going to happen if more and more drop? And so for sure, I think if counselors promoted some AP support class, I think they have over the summer, I'm not really sure, but if they promoted it more to students of colors, maybe they wouldn't see as much of a drop. And as well, I saw Mr. Rouse, he tried to talk about it, to have a discussion, and I saw his efforts, and I just wish that he would continue with that and try to see that as a major issue. Because if you have more students of colors in those classes, then you have more of a perspective, which are definitely needed.
Well, it was like this semester is like my first time ever being like in an honors class, and it's like crazy because like I've been doing regular English for so long, and I feel like I've been ready to like go into honors. Like I've been ready for a challenge, and it's crazy because like they don't even like ask you, like the counselors when they're telling you about your classes, like they don't like if you haven't been in honors class, they're gonna tell you like, oh yeah, you're gonna go to this class, and it's like the normal class or whatever, and like they didn't recognize that I was able to be in an honors class. Like they didn't put any efforts to that. And like when I'm in that class, it's like I know there's like one person of color that I kind of recognize, and it's like I see him and he's not like he sits alone, and there's like a lot of white people in that class, and he doesn't really want to like sit with other people, work with other people in the groups, or like raise his hand, participate in class discussions and stuff. So.
Well, related to that and what we can do to introduce the opportunity for more folks to really have to speak with each other and to understand and to build a particular skill set around how you engage with people who are not like you. It is not a skill set that very many adults have. And so we pride ourselves in Oak Park in being a diverse community, but until this point we really haven't been very intentional about how we help support our young people in developing the skills and the ability to work with other people, to really know deeply about other people. And SAFE has stepped into that space and is working on a curriculum for students. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and why it's important?
So SAFE has been working on this, well, SAFE Students Advocating for Equity. So we've been working on this student-led curriculum for years now. It's just so happened that now it's taking off and people are actually starting to listen. It's basically, we just wanted a class that isn't just focused on one particular race and their struggles, because, you know, everyone has to, at some point, OPRF and not even just the school, the community, like we're gonna have to realize that we're not that diverse. And we can keep saying that we're diverse because it's a nice word and it sounds so great and cute, but we're really not. And so if we wanted to take those steps, like the students need to come together, we need to have spaces where they can talk about, you know, as a person of color, I feel like this. Oh really? As a black person, I feel like this. So, you know, like we can relate, like we're all oppressed by white people. It sucks, but it's true. And we all go through very similar things. Now, we do have strong differences, but we do have very, very strong similarities in some of the issues that we go through and some of the triumphs that we go through. So if we can all like learn together, I do want to learn about, you know, Asian history. I want to know what it's like. I want to know what they're going through at OPRF, because I can't just keep, you know, isolating myself and only talking about what I go through, because that's what I'm comfortable with. It's time to like step out. It's going to be, right now, it's being pre-piloted this semester, and then next year to have a pilot, an actual pilot. And then if that goes well, then the year after that, it will become an actual class that is mandatory. It's just a class that teaches racial consciousness and like I was saying earlier about the space for white people, when they do have questions and they feel like they're problematic, they don't have that opportunity to, because I feel like people of color, sometimes we do bully white people when they ask something dumb, you know, we just like off bat, like just shut up, but it's not, like we should have that space where white people can learn about other people's experiences and not have to feel closed off or be scared that they're gonna say something wrong. Because everybody in that class, in that space should be learning, even the teacher, even as a student leader, I should be learning. Everyone should be able to breathe with one another, should be able to, at the end of the day, explain what they go through, how they feel about political issues, how they feel about race, anything that is gender, religion, like it's equity. And although we're focusing on racial equity, they all tie into each other. You can't have one without the other, really. So we don't have those spaces. We don't have anywhere where we can learn about one another. So we had to just make it ourselves. So we're just like, all of us who made it are 17, 18, trying to figure out like, what is everyone going through? Like, it's just it's 4 black girls, 5 black girls just sitting in a room just trying to figure out like, how do we incorporate everybody that goes to the school? And, you know, without having this one demographic of just black men and black women in the room, we don't know. So we're just going and networking with people, asking students like, how do you feel about this? Like, what should we do about, you know, like, should we talk to South Asian Club? Like, what do we do? So it's just been a lot of work, and I think honestly because of America to me and people being like super like peed off about like how OPRF looks in that lens, now people want to push racial equity. So why not give them the space? And why not have it during school? Why not have a good teacher of color that's not teaching people of color about their history? We can do that, and that's what we want to do. Like, we want something that hasn't been seen before, but people of color secretly want, and we always think about it, and it's like, nah, we can't ever do that, but we can, and so we just did it ourselves, and now we have the help. And for instance, like, until something bad happens, like, we have like swastikas on our school, everybody floods. Like, if we had this panel when that was happening, this room would have been full. But now, because everyone is fine, they're comfortable, everything is nice, and back to our nice, diverse Oak Park community, no one's gonna come to anything, and that's not cool. So we all deserve a place. Like, you guys always say, how can I help? Come to stuff like this, listen to us, listen to the ideas we have, because the racial equity curriculum was just an idea, and every adult told us no, basically, and we just kept pushing it and pushing it. So if we had more support from adults, who actually, because now I know, I'm sitting up here and you guys are listening to me like, oh, that sounds pretty good. See, if we had that from the beginning, it would have been done already, so.
I disagree. I think Oak Park and River Forest is diverse. I grew up in a community called Cicero, and you had 97% Latinos, so I would say it's pretty diverse. And I think adults and just the school doesn't fully comprehend that as students we are capable of connecting with each other. Like, we're all mostly similar ages, and so we are able to talk about experiences. And so personally, I created a club called Minority Student Alliance. And so it was a group of minorities. We had APA, which is the LGBTQ plus community. We had Best Buddies, which is those that have disabilities. And then we have Aspira, we have Salvation Youth, we had SAFE, we had Blue, we are Pan Nation. And so we are able to connect, and we are able to form those values that have been lost in this community, which is actually listening, understanding, and being compassionate towards other, and tolerance mostly. And so being tolerant of each other is something that is missing, for sure.
Going back to the college analogy again, you know, when you go to college, you're required to pretty much take a sensitivity class, you know, on racial and sexual and, you know, basically all the different sensitive areas that you could go through in college. And we talk about starting early, you know, like, why do you have to wait until college to be made aware of, you know, how other people in this world feel and what other people in this world are going through? It's so important to start early, and you know, I'm a huge supporter and fan of what SAFE is doing with the curriculum and with the idea for a class. And I think that is a really great opportunity that a lot of people in the community should support, because it lays the foundation for our school and the students of our school being the leaders of tomorrow when it comes to holding the conversations on racial equity.
I also think that, going back to what you were saying about how the community didn't really support the racial equity stuff until like something happened, I feel like people have failed as a community like that. And there are so many people that claim to be, pro-racial equity and pro-diversity and whatnot, but then they help when something helps. They actually don't help. They just say something when something big happens and then they stop. And I feel like that's a huge failing on your part, because if you truly are a part of this community and you see, say you didn't know about it before, which is part of your ignorance, to be honest, but say you didn't know about it before and then something happens and now you know about it and you still don't do anything about that, that's honestly all on you, because you know that people are trying, and people of color, especially women of color, have jam-packed their lives trying to change their community and do everything. And I feel that it's a failing, even on me and other people who make excuses like, oh, I have a lot of homework, or I have so much to do, or I need my sleep, things like that. We get it, but you should always try to help your community in some way, which is thank you all for coming here, but I hope that people actually do stuff about it and help in the ways that they think they can, and spread the word and things like that, because this wouldn't have happened. Certain events would have happened, and conversations and other stuff wouldn't honestly be necessary if people just stepped up in the past and have done it continuously.
What you said is very true. At Aspira, we only have a few boys. And so it's very odd that when there's club meetings, all the boys just disappear. And so I'm kind of wondering where they are. And they should be involved because there's certain issues that pertain to them. Well, also, I don't know if you guys have ever been asked the question oh, what are you? And I think that comes with learning about each other. And I've been asked that question, and honestly, I don't mind. I just think you phrased it wrong. But I know what you were trying to say. You were trying to find out more about my identity. And so I would just most likely answer, oh, I'm Mexican. But I think the intentions of when connecting to another person who is different from you have to be there. You have to actually try to put the effort in to listen to what they're saying without judgment and without any bias that society has put in you, and that's for sure very difficult. But I have hope that it could happen here in this community.
Yeah, and I have to say, Lexi, you're way nicer than me, because when people ask, what am I started responding with, I'm an angel or a demon, I'm not human, because it's just, at first I was okay, I get it, and I still get it, but I just get so irritated. I'm if you want to know about me, then ask, what's your ethnicity, or what's that, something more respectful, not questioning my humanity or something, even though you're not, you kind of are. So you're way nicer than me on that one. But yeah, I think that's also a failing on just the community too, and just the way that things are brought up and stuff like that.
Just to answer your question about where are the boys of color are out there following society standards of where they should be, not somewhere in a space where you're talking about your emotions, not someplace where you feel like you're going to be supported. They're not used to spaces like that because we don't give them to them. This is all very new. Because SAFE is just the same. It's all people of color can come, and there's not very many boys. And the boys that do come, they don't contribute much, but their presence is very much loved and appreciated. So it's just finding out those ways to support them, because they don't. It's hard to break something that's been started their lives have been set up, how they're supposed to act has been set up since they were born, since they were in the womb and the mom found out they were a boy. I'm going to put them in sports, they're going to wear blue, and this is what we're going to do. And so, breaking that is very hard, but when you meet them, because they're not going to want to meet you halfway, you have to go 100%, 110%, you have to pick up their slack, because honestly, it's not their fault, because they don't know anything else. So last panel, I brought it up, you have to really love them and let them know that they have a place. If it ever comes time that that mask that they have, that facade of masculinity breaks, that you're gonna be there for them regardless, So they don't really know what it's like to have that space where they can just cry it out or grieve with one another because they're too afraid of what society is going to say. And I would be too if that's how I was brought up. And it's really hard, I know, as a woman of color to try to like pick up the pieces of broken men because I don't know what it's like to be a man. But I do the very best that I can and saying like, I do love you and I hear what you're saying. I understand. That wasn't cool. Just stuff like that. And not beating down on them because I'm pretty sure in another life they would like to be here, but I also wouldn't want to be, a part of the social suicide of opening up and crying in front of people as well. So just meeting them and not like expecting for them to, when they come, to like contribute because it's a new space,
It really goes to me, I think that what you guys were just saying about having men and boys involved in, social movements, I think is extremely important. And I think, the best way to do that is really to move past the toxic masculinity that defines how we think men should be in this country. Men aren't taught to be emotional. Men aren't taught to be emotional outside of the football field, or outside of maybe a funeral if you're lucky. I mean, it's not okay, and I made a decision when I went into high school, I didn't want to do sports. I'm 6'1", people ask me all the time, do you play basketball? I don't, because I, care about social justice, I care about public policy, and, I know that there's going to be plenty of boys and men who go on to do, sports, and that's great for them, and I applaud them for that, but like Michaela just said, there are so many issues that, especially African American men, I can speak to, go through, that are talked about and that people want to deal with. The unemployment rate for young African American men in the city of Chicago is 50%, and that's not an issue that only black women or only women or only a couple guys should have to deal with. That, is an issue that we as black men, we as men of America, should come together to deal with. And I think, like I just said, full circle, comes down to breaking down that idea of toxic masculinity. It comes down to, being okay with the fact that your kid might not do athletics, that your kid might not adhere to traditional masculine things. Because, there's so many important issues that black men and other minority men are needed on.
Yeah, I can say that I know toxic masculinity for people of color has always been really bad, but in the Asian community it's just absolutely horrible. And I don't know how many Asian parents actually encourage their boys to go do sports. It's more like excel at every educational thing, show like no emotion, no signs of femininity or we're gonna like freak out, And I remember one of my friends who's Indian, when he came out to his parents that he was gay, they like almost had like a panic attack because they're both from India, and that's just like absolutely unheard of. And I think the discussion of how men should be treated, and I think for the Asian community, definitely has to be changed because it's so severe, and I think the damage that it inflicts on sons and people is just really traumatizing, and it doesn't help at all because in our South Asian club there are no guys yet, and I have seen South Asian guys at my school, and we have like ran to them saying join our South Asian club, desperately and everything, and they're like, no thanks, So like you said, you can't meet them halfway. We have to like chase them down, And I think it's very nerve-wracking, especially when you're still a teenager and your parents are still very much involved in your lives and stuff like that. And I think going against them is pretty pressuring, even though like the teenage like stereotypes that we're all rebellious. It's still scary going against your parents. My parents are kind of scary, not gonna lie, in a good way. Like they're scary. So like I would want to go against them like horribly, anything like that. And I think that everyone kind of want to live up or make their parents or guardian proud of them, and going against them and doing something that they might not approve of or is that slightly out of their comfort zone is very terrifying. And I can understand why some of the South Asian guys at our school are like, we're not going to join this club full of girls that are advocating for South Asian rights. Like, what is that? And I'm trying. I'm really trying. So if any of y'all are watching this, please join the club. And I do think it's a community thing for sure.
Well, it's been interesting to hear you all talk about some of the social interactions and the challenges that you're seeing in that space. And we've talked a lot about the schools, but the schools are within a community. What has been your experience? I know there was a gentleman in America, to me, talked about it as an experiment. And to some extent it is. I mean, this isn't something that's done in most communities around the country, that we have at least the diversity that we do have of different groups of people, both racially, ethnically, religiously, economically, living in the same space. What has been the experience for you all in terms of navigating that socially?
So outside of the school, being
Your mic isn't working.
Thanks. Hold on. I just put that. Or try to put that. So you can hold it. I can't put that. So being like outside of a student, being an activist here, it's kind of tough. It's weird. It's not what you expected. When something happens racially that, especially towards the black community, you expect a lot of black people to be there angry. There's really a lot of white people, which is really weird and concerning to me because it's kind of like it's a space for you to grieve with other black people. You started a protest. A black person starts a protest. There's a bunch of white people there. So it's like, first off, well, thanks for coming to the protest, but it's kind of like, what's going on in the African American community that like people don't want to speak up for themselves? I'm not gonna blame the whole African American community. I'm not blaming anyone at all, but it's just kind of always been a question to me is like, even having something like this when there's a bunch of people of color, students of color on stage, there's a lot of white people here. And at the last panel, there was, I think, only one white man on the panel, and it was just a bunch of white people. So I'm not understanding like why those spaces, we have a hard time sharing those spaces even though we're supporting our own people. And it's kind of challenging for me to navigate that myself. But I just don't understand, but at the same time, I feel bad for my people because they feel like they can't go to any space without white people coming. But it's like we're trying to work together, and it's like as I grew up, I was taught like you should hate white people because they did this to you. You know, they enslaved your people, they raped them, and da da da. But segregation was so bad. But I'm confused as to how we hate white people so much, but we also don't want to be alone. So as a child, I've always been trying to navigate, like, how do I talk to white people? Because for a brief moment in time, not that brief, but I did not like white people. I was just like, ew, like, I'm not talking to you, you did this. Like, growing up, learning about slavery, like, oh my gosh. But then as I got older, I'm like, we're not gonna change anything if we're just all segregated. This is like what we literally fought against. So just as an activist trying to figure it out, I'm still very confused and I'm still learning like what crowd to expect and how to talk to that crowd and like how to, like make sure that we merge together because I'm not white and I don't know how to I don't know how do we make our people mix with each other and actually enjoy it so that we can actually have something productive. Yeah.
I can speak for an odd/interesting social experience growing up here because there's both Black and Indian people in this community, and since I'm both of them, you would think that like, oh, you got your community, but in fact I was like rejected by both of them. And the reasons why the Indian community, I feel like, has always been very, like, if you're not the model minority Indian or Asian or whatever, then we don't really want to socialize with you because then we'll look bad. And not only me, but my mom, who's not the typical Indian, she was in the military, survivor of domestic violence and all of that. She's rejected from her own community as well, and she's like completely Indian, not even mixed or anything. And from the black community, I think I've been seen as like not black enough, and also because I associate with a lot of white people, because like I said, I've been in like those higher level classes, and I don't really know like all the black people at the school, and sometimes I feel like maybe like I should reach out and like, you know, be more in my community or something like that, but I feel like I've always been pushed away. And it's weird, and it's always frustrated me because in the Asian community, white people are accepted more than like I am, and where my mom is, or other weird Asian people are. And it's really frustrating because it's like, we're Asian, why can't we like come together and change together and accept each other? Why is it that someone who's a completely different race, in fact, their ancestors like, you know, oppressed you, but you're loving them all of a sudden? Like, how does that make any sense? And it's always been a struggle for me, because even now, I still don't know, like, how do I communicate and how do I acknowledge both sides of my race? Like, I'm in the South Asian Club, should I be part of Blue too? You know, stuff like that. It's a very, like, confusing thing. I don't think I'll ever really figure it out, to be honest, like, on this path right now. But it's definitely interesting in a diverse community like this, trying to navigate it. I kind of helped like get the South Asian Club together, and I think if I didn't help get that South Asian Club together, I don't know if I would actually join it, because I've always been intimidated about walking into completely Asian spaces because I'm the only one that doesn't look Asian. But like walking into our club, we have so many mixed people. Like we have a Chilean Indian, we have also white Indians and Mexican Indians. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like for me, it's just like, oh, I'm not alone, thank God, you know. But it's very nerve-wracking. Like if I go into the temple and then there's like a bunch of like Desis, like real Asians, you know, and I'm just like, I don't like belong here. I feel like, yeah, no, this isn't you. And those looks that people give you when you're not supposed to be in a certain place are always so nerve-wracking, and I get those a lot. Like even if I'm in a space with all black people, I feel like I don't belong there either. So it's just a struggle. I feel like a lot of mixed people can relate to it because they don't know like to which race they belong and how they can be part of both of them and like themselves at the same time.
Just going off that, I really relate to what you said as another mixed race person. You know, I mean, I've been told because of the way I talk and because of, you know, who I hang out with and, you know, kind of the classes that I'm in, I've been told I'm an Oreo. I've been told that I sound white. I, you know, am not considered African American by some people. You know, I remember I was in a room and someone was doing like a head count for some reason of how many black people were there, and I was like, oh, like forgot me, and like, oh no, you don't count. You know, and you know, it's frustrating because, you know, being mixed race, you know, it's beautiful and it's awesome and it's unique. But there's no mixed race culture that I feel like I can really grasp onto. There's no culture in this country, you know, centered around, you know, how awesome it is to be multiracial. And, you know, that kind of leaves you in a position where you feel like you have to choose at some points. And that's hard when you don't feel accepted by either community in some respects. You know, a lot of African Americans, I mean, I'll be honest with you, you know, a lot of my friends, most of my friends are white. And it's not because I have more in common with, you know, white people. It's not because I like white people more than black people. It's not because I'm, you know, a self-internalized hating person or anything like that. Some people think that, you know. It's just because of who I feel like wants to be friends with me, you know, and I'm friends with anyone of any race. But I definitely have felt some pushback, and I definitely have felt at times that people don't even realize that there's no connection between the two of us. They presume that there's no connection because they think just like from a couple words coming out of my mouth that they're going to have nothing in common with me. So, being mixed race in Oak Park, we have more mixed race people than, most communities do by a lot. And that's awesome and that's great to see. But I definitely think, when we talk about race, we need to talk about what it means to be two races in this town and in this country. Because I think that's something that a lot of mixed race people are still trying to figure out. It's not a new thing. It's just something that people haven't talked about for a really long time. And, that's a conversation that I think respective communities need to have in terms of learning to accept and love and understand mixed race people. So.
I don't know, Daysha, you said that you don't consider yourself a real Asian, but I do. I think you're a real Asian. But I'm part of the Latino community, but I'm also part of the immigrant community. So me and my family, we immigrated from Mexico. And so when I moved to Cicero and then I moved to Oak Park, it was for sure very different. I mean, just school-wise, I'm telling you, it was like 97% Latino to just this whole other categories of people that I never really met. So you had Asians, and then you had black people, and then you had white people, and so it was very different. But being an immigrant in OPRF, it's for sure kind of hard admitting it, because I'm always scared of what kind of views that person has of me, what kind of biases they have of me. And I can tell you, like, I don't bring drugs, I don't bring any weapons or anything. I'm just a person who moved countries. Illegally, I guess. I have to say that people think being an immigrant is one of my main identities, and it's not. I consider myself more the daughter of an immigrant than an immigrant myself, because as a daughter of an immigrant, I was the one helping my family, and I was the one that had to lose my Spanish and gain English and just sort of take that part in the family where I speak and translate, and I also had to take decisions when I was little about certain things because my parents didn't understand the culture, they didn't understand how the system worked. And so being exposed to that and coming here to OPRF, I sort of tend to shy away from topics of immigrants and also topics of whether I'm welcomed at school or not. I know a lot of my Latino friends don't feel welcome because they fear talking Spanish in their classes or just in the community itself, because there's always been this topic that if you speak Spanish in public, you might be talking about a person, and you're really not. That's just your language that you were born with. And I am incredibly proud of my language, and that's why at school it's very hard to know that if I take the Spanish classes there, they're going to be subpar to the level of Spanish that I am exposed to at my house. And so I guess what I'm questioning is, what if the school was to have a class for those that their first language was Spanish? And I would be exposed to so many different people that their first language was Spanish, and they would also feel welcome because that's sort of like welcoming their language.
Okay. We wanted to leave a little bit of time. If anyone in the audience had questions, you had some cards that you could write down your questions. So if anyone has any questions, we have some folks who can come and pick it up for you. And we can share it with the folks here on the stage. None? Anyone? You do? Okay. In the meantime, I'd like to share with you as well that we realize that this kind of conversation is something that has been much needed for a long time, and that the adults have really not helped create the space or help support that. And so there is a commitment on the part of parents at OPRF Wendy Daniels and other parents to help create the space so that this conversation continues. So we're kind of starting it here, but we're not ending it here.
We're speed writing.
Do you have one already? We can get started. Thank you. If there is one thing you can change, what would it be?
All right, name two.
I think I can get a head start. Yeah, because I would say if there was one thing I could change, it would, I don't know, maybe it's thinking too big, but the values that OPRF has, I would say to not fear change, because I think, like I mentioned it before, that the values that this community needs are not here yet. And so I think they could be developed as the population of students of color grows. And so for sure values of tolerance, acceptance, I don't know if those are related. And then you also have just empathy in general. And I think it starts with small changes, which I don't know if you guys have any ideas.
I don't really have any ideas about that, but I think a change I would like to see that is something, because there are a lot of white people in this community, even though we are very diverse. What I hear a lot from white people, not just in the school, but in the community, is that they'll say, like, yes, I support, like, Black Lives Matter, or I support, like, some, movement of color, but then they don't really support it because they don't really understand the struggle, and they don't really attempt to understand the struggle like they should. So I feel like a larger effort from white people to try, you know, and just like help out more and understand more, which also means more conversations like this and more information and like more classes, like the racial equity class and things like that. But I do feel like a larger effort from the white community and also the Asian community, because we've been lacking in a lot of ways.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Terry. So, I don't know, it's like a really broad topic, like I don't know, it's like so big. Like, are we focusing on OPRF, like to change things in OPRF?
Or in the community.
Okay, I think I would change, like, maybe like the people, I think we should we should change, well, not that it can happen, but like, I wish there was like more, like Latinos from the start here, or like more Asians from the start here, and, because like, I feel like that would be, it would just be like less challenging, like the stuff that we're talking about now, and like the stuff that we're facing, I just think it would be like less challenging because we would we would have connections to each other and everything. So yeah, that's like one thing.
I would change the speed in which we try to change things, and I would change the representation of people of color, like teachers or people who lead. I would change, like, I would add more people of color in the school, in the community, that people, like people of authority that children can like look up to. Because I know I don't really see that much because we don't retain many teachers of color. Yeah. What would you change?
Of course, a lot of things, you know, on a larger level. But, you know, I hope people, you know, after hearing a little bit of, you know, what I said about systematic racism and about, you know, the bigger picture, I hope people can kind of change their attitude and their understanding of, you know, how some of the local issues that we face are tied into much bigger problems that we as a country need to deal with. And, you know, I guess one thing I'd also change is people need to stay engaged in our community when it comes to voting, when it comes to staying aware of issues, issues that don't pertain to you as well. It can't be until it happens to you. We can't be so reactionary. I think that caring about issues that are happening hundreds of miles away from your home, caring about people who look nothing like you, those are important skills to develop because, then when something happens, you know how to better react and you're not, puzzled at an issue you know nothing about, so.
What is the best advice you would share with incoming freshmen?
I think that at its core, and I speak perhaps more for myself in this situation, but I think OPREF is a good place. There are good people in the building. There are a lot of people working to do great things in the building when it comes to making everyone feel safe and welcome and included and making sure everyone achieves. We don't get it right 100% of the time, nowhere does, and we can't pretend that, there's some place that we're gonna be someday that, we don't have to worry about any of these issues ever again. But just know that if, you're coming to OPRF, that someone has your back, whether that's a fellow student, whether that's one of the amazing teachers that we have, whether that's one of the administrators or social workers or, support staff that's in the building, someone is looking out for you and loves you and cares about you.
I think another piece of advice I would have is, don't just stay quiet about things that you have a problem with, and not really be willing to change it. I think they should be able to, you should be able to question the normal. So don't stay quiet.
As a senior, I would say, I don't know, I don't remember who said it, but you were like, maybe I'm dreaming too big. It doesn't exist. You can't dream too big. You can literally do anything that you want. You just have to focus and be determined. Anything. I'm pretty sure you can make pigs fly. So I know for a fact because I've done it. I did not think I would be able, 18, making a curriculum with my friends and becoming an activist and making change happen in a school where my first year I was called a nigger. You could not tell me that I would be able to do this. So you can literally do anything, just have the right people around you, the right energy, always stay positive. If somebody tells you no, challenge them, and just keep going.
You've almost answered this next question. What advice would you provide to a student of color who is uncomfortable speaking up in spaces dominated by white students?
Well, that's just any space at all. You're gonna have to, at some point, you can't bottle stuff in for too long. It's unhealthy. So at some point, you're just gonna have to say, forget about it. Because although people of color think all white people are bad, there's some in there that are really willing to support you. And a lot, especially right now, there's a lot of them willing to listen and understand. Not that they're always gonna agree, but they're willing to listen and understand. So just know that someone in that room, at least one person in that room, just values your opinion. And if you don't speak up, especially a lot of the spaces I'm in, I'm the only person of color. If I don't speak up, nobody else is, I'm not gonna, like I said, I do not want white people telling other people about my history as a black woman or anything. So if you don't speak up, nobody's gonna speak up for you. And you don't want to be misinterpreted, you don't want people to get the wrong message, so it's better that it comes from you.
I agree. I think also just keeping in mind that there would be those moments where you would be with your people again, which is other students of color. And whenever I'm in a situation where I have to speak up in front of white students and there's not a lot of Latinos around me that can contribute to that, I always just remember that I'll go after school and I'll go to the balcony, and if I'm there, there's going to be other aspirantes there, and we all form in a little group, and so that always makes me laugh. But I guess just remembering that you have to be proud of who you are, And by not speaking up, you are doing a disservice to other students of color. And so I just say, like, you have nothing to lose.
What can we do to incentivize the administration in OPRF to have more diversity in history classes? Latin history, Asian history, etc.
Well, I feel like all of those histories are part of American history. Like, all of us are required to take an American history class, whether it's honors American history, regular, or AP US history, which I took. That was a mistake, but I took it anyway. And it's always been like a black and white dynamic. Even in the textbook, like the Native American section is like 3 pages. And I know there's a lot more history to that. And when we talk about like the Industrial Revolution, when people from all these countries were coming, like from Ireland, we only talk about Ireland, when I know for a fact, because I know history, that there were Asian immigrants coming as well, and Latinx coming as well to America. And the only time you talk about the Latina community is when you talk about like the Spanish-American War, and maybe the Mexican-American War, and like that's it. Asians aren't really brought up like at all, really. Now that I think about it, even in world history, I think that's also an issue with like what teacher you have, because my teacher talked about like Hinduism and like we talked about Islam. We got really deep into discussion about South Asian and Middle Eastern culture, which was really cool. But then I talked to some of my friends freshman year, and we were taking world history, and they didn't do any of that. It's also same for English. Like this year, I read The Joy Luck Club, and we're going to be reading a book by Jhumpa Lahiri later. But some people aren't reading any of those books, and they're all white male authors. So I think if there's like a fixed curriculum, it will be a lot better. And I think making it diverse, not just with authors in English, but like saying all of the history that happened in America, not just the black and white history, because underlying all of that, there have always been minority groups there. They're just never talked about. So I think if we just involve that in the curriculum and made it like a mandatory thing, then that would help.
Like I have an example, like, cause also like I'm talking about my honors classes again. Like I was so confused, cause like in my regular English honors class, not honors English class, we were reading the book The Hate You Give, and that's like it's like about a black girl and like her experiences, and her friend got shot or whatever. And then like I moved to the honors class, and then they were reading, like it said British literature, and I was confused. I was like, why is it British literature in this like honors class, I guess? I was just like, I want to, like even though I'm in this honors English, like I want to also like, I want to read like books that I was reading in the regular English too, like about not just British literature, like that kind of like annoyed me.
This is not a question, but a compliment to all the panelists for your thoughtful sharing. And then there's a statement, there is just one human race. What is achievement gap? How does it arise in a classroom situation in, say, math and science? What contributes to the achievement gap, economics or race? In what way can the achievement gap be closed?
It really doesn't have anything to do with race. I think that, it does, obviously, we look at the statistics in terms of, who, has higher grade point average, who is scoring higher on the SATs. Yes, there are the parallels with race, but add in race into the conversation with the achievement gap, one must be considerate and careful because, when talking about it, sometimes, people will get down the road of, oh, well, African Americans generally are just going to be lower performing or just are not going to be as high achieving as their counterparts. But it's a much deeper issue than just your race. It has, like I said earlier, so much to do with, your family's background. If you have college-educated parents, if you, come from a family where you can afford, SAT tutoring, where you can afford, help, in other classes. It even comes down to, can you stay after school to study because someone will be able to pick you up at 5 o'clock? A lot of people feel like they don't have anyone, to pick them up, or if they don't catch their bus, they're not going to be able to get home, so they can't study. It's a socioeconomic issue. It's an issue that's really so much bigger than Oak Park and River Forest. And it's an issue that starts much earlier than at the high school level. And, I think that if we want to talk about, what can be done and what can we as a community do, because, it is a big issue and it is daunting and it is intimidating. We can encourage people to get their kids in pre-K. We can, ensure that we get rid of tracking systems in elementary school that apply the term gifted to children. We can, just ensure equity and diverse curriculums that make everyone feel empowered and educated and welcome in classrooms. No one wants to be in a classroom where they feel like, they're walking in to fail. So it's a lot to do with the attitude of the school, the attitude of the teacher, and of the community.
I agree with everything you said except for the race part, because I get what you said, but there are some racial aspects where there's a bias of your teacher. Even if you're a person of color and you are a very well-performing student, let's say in 3rd grade when they start doing that gifted and talented thing, if your teacher has that systemic bias or whatever, then they're gonna put the white kids in the higher level class, even though you're doing just as well, even better than them. And then you have to rely on your parents or your guardians to push you because they know that that gifted and talented class is what you need and what's going to make you successful. And there are many guardians and parents that can't do that. And I think I was lucky because I had parents that were there to advocate for me. But if I didn't, I don't think I would actually be in the high level classes that I'm in right now. Not that I'm really complaining at the moment, but it's just, it is a pretty racial issue when it starts from that young of an age, because even with teachers of who do they discipline more, and then you take those those surveys and things like that, that's always in there. So.
What advice do you have for parents and other important grown-ups in your life for best supporting you as young persons of color?
Well, show up, but I guess show up with more people who will actually listen. Most of the time when I come to stuff like this, it's the same faces. So just expanding, or just what did you learn from this? Go off and tell that to whoever you think needs it, your racist cousin. Also giving us spaces where we can speak, because you guys are literally watching us. Students of color just have conversations that relate to each other, oh yeah, that does happen to me. So it's we're all just learning, we are going through similar experiences, but we don't have a space where we can all talk. This is the first time we've all talked, but we have a lot of the same opinions. I think that's crazy. So just providing that for us, funding activities after school with people of color. We don't have those, but people put a lot of money into sports. That's important and everything, but I feel the racial tension in Oak Park, since you want to be diverse, put money into being diverse.
I definitely think I'm not saying us as youth our voice is not important, but I think to adults it's really, it tends they tend to kind of not listen to us, or especially I think that the adults should help us deal with counselors and the people that are controlling what happens in the school, principals, and actually help us deal with them, because it's definitely the adults they have a little bit more resources, and a little they have some other knowledge that the youth doesn't. So I think definitely helping us deal with with the administration.
I feel like I'm saying this more to the Asian parents, but just parents in general, that change is fine. If your kid isn't focusing solely on their education and they want to do some activist work, don't stop them from doing that, support them, you know? And especially to like the conservative, traditional parents that are like just focus on this one thing, you know? Or like maybe do some sports for a scholarship or something like that and don't get too involved in the community because it gets messy and controversial. That's a good thing because it's probably going to happen later in their lives anyway. So I would say just honestly encourage them to get involved rather than stop them. So.
I kind of wish my mom was here today, but she's working. But I guess something I would say to my mother would be that I thank her for being so strong for me when I'm doing all of this activist work. And although she disagreed with it very much, she is very much of that mentality of keeping quiet because you are a Latina and you are a woman. But I guess I have a different topic to talk about, which would be to those parents that their student is a person of color. I would say to also worry about their mental health because a lot of students of color go through mental illnesses and it's not talked about. And so I think parents, you have to get out of your comfort zone and try to bring up those tough topics and try to actually help them because we do face challenges at school, but we also face challenges in our own personal lives. And so I think that approach needs to be reinforced.
That's very good. I'm going to ask the audience to indulge just two more questions. I know we're a bit past our time, but they're two good questions. So, as a middle schooler who is about to start a social justice club here in Julian, what is some advice you would give us?
Okay, if you have an idea, I think all ideas should be listened to. But if you have one and you think it's really good and it's gonna change the world and it's really, really important to you, make sure you have everything mapped out because even though I'm 18 now, when I present something to the board, I just presented something to every district in Oak Park and they still treat us like little babies. Don't let that happen to you because it's an issue like broader than just your age and they're gonna treat you and talk to you and dumb things down because of your age. Don't let them do that to you. Have all your information ready. Be ready to answer any questions that they have. Like dedicate, not all your time because you gotta do your homework, but dedicate a significant amount of time to just, educating yourself on whatever your idea is, whatever you need. Just make sure it's prepared so they cannot pull one over on you because adults, although you're kids and they want to baby you, they will also take advantage of you and they will do it so secretively you won't even know. So just I'm not saying do it by yourself, but make sure the circle that you have, you know that they have all the information, that if you can't go to a board meeting or any activity that you can also rely, don't do it all by yourself. Like, have somebody with you, even if it's your mom or your dad, just make sure that they know that it's important and that they won't let you down. Don't have anyone that would hinder you or hinder your idea or your experience of any kind. Just make sure you stay focused, stay determined, and don't think that your idea is nothing. It's just an idea. Put money into it, ideas, the dumbest stuff be made and makes like a ton of money. So you might as well just keep a journal, write it down, see what you can do, invest in it, and network. Make sure you network, and just educate yourself and never, ever, ever back down or give up.
I agree. I created my own club at school, and I would say be creative with it. Don't only try to hold meetings and certain things like that. Just try to really get to know the people that go to your club, and also food helps. Like students like snacks after school, so just get cookies, get chips, anything.
Last question, and this question is really just for you two on the end. Do you see the ways, well, I mean, you all, the rest of you need to think about it. Do you see the ways that local elections affect you? Are you ready to get out the vote?
I absolutely think local elections affect me. You know, it's a cliche, but, you know, act locally, think globally. You know, and, you know, I think that if we want anything to happen in our community, we need to pay attention to local elections. You know, we just sat here and talked about how important it is to have representation from minorities and from the youth when it comes to decisions that impact us. And, you know, I know that I'm going to spend effort and time and my voice and my position in the school working to encourage people to get out and vote for the Oak Park elections, to make themselves aware of what different people stand for. Because it affects you. Even if you don't realize it, it affects you. So I realize and I look at the significance of local elections. I think more young kids should, and I think if there's any generation that's going to start to understand and start to appreciate the value of local elections, it's going to be our generation, because we're not the leaders of tomorrow anymore, we're the leaders of today. You know, we are adults, we can vote, you know, we're here, and we're going to make our voice heard, and it might take a little time to get there with local elections and with midterms, but, you know, I'm confident that it's going to be this generation that really moves the ball forward.
I'm super excited to vote. Although I am super excited to vote, I know that I am like alone almost. I know that a lot of students my age and of my color, they don't know about voting. They don't want to do it. Either they don't want to do it or they don't have the information to do it. The school does kind of do like a lousy job of letting us know when to vote, who to vote, how do you even vote? What are you voting for? So, you know, if you can, another way to help is actually, giving that information out, some of us really do not know how to vote and what we're voting for. We just are just existing and letting things happen, and we do want to change things, but nobody really thinks about voting and nobody tells us about voting, and that hinders not our growth but yours. And so, you know, just giving us that information,
adults, we do a horrible job in that space.
Yeah.
We complain that the young people don't vote, but we don't prepare them to vote. And they shared that with me, and so SAY will be working with the League of Women Voters and with our village clerk to put together information so that there's an understanding of how our government is structured, what positions are available, and who's running for them. So we will pledge to do better. Yes. I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank you all. But before I do that, I want to ask you all, those of you who were here the last time, one of the things that we really want to do is make sure that we are getting better at what we do. And so there is a QR code and also the survey link on the handout that you all received. And it's really important, if you can fill out, it's just 3 short questions, but they're questions to help us do better each time we do this, because the goal is that we really get better at communicating with the community. So please, it's structured so that you can do it before you leave. If for some reason you don't have a good signal, I need you all to pledge to me that you will do this as soon as you get a signal. Because we don't get much feedback, and the feedback will really help us do better. So if you do have a signal, start doing it now. But just wanted to let you know that tonight was the second of 4 planned conversations, each highlighting different aspects of the community in which work is occurring or needs to occur. These conversations in our monthly Say Connects publication, which can be found usually on the 4th Wednesday of each month in the Wednesday Journal, are made possible by a grant to the Wednesday Journal by the Good Heart Work Smart Foundation. Please help us improve by taking the survey, but once again, thank you so much for coming, but thank you all so much for taking the time on a school night. Yes. To share with us. We really, truly appreciate it. As you see, this is being filmed and will be available on the Say YouTube channel. So tell your neighbors, your friends, and other folks that they really missed it, but they can still watch it on their own. So once again, thank you so much. Have a safe trip home. And probably, it's been very busy lately with the elections and with so much coming up. That we really want to make sure we have good turnout. So we may wait a little while before we have the next event, but please stay tuned. Pay attention to the Wednesday Journal, to Say's website, Facebook. We will let you know when the next event is happening. So, thank you.